Perfect. Welcome, everyone. My name is Erica Rodriguez, and I'm the Associate Director of Employer Engagement at the USC Career Center, and I want to welcome you to this year's Virtual Summer Summit. Today's session includes live captioning, and the setting can be adjusted according to your personal preference. I also want to remind participants that the session is being recorded and will be available on the Career Center's YouTube channel within a week. We are excited to have you join us in today's conversations regarding recruitment and retention through DE&I. All participants are encouraged to ask questions in the Q&A section, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Now, I want to introduce you to my colleague, Malika Samtani, who will be heading up the conversation and moderating today's panel.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Malika Samtani. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the Internship and Diversity Programs Advisor at the USC Career Center. As we just honored Juneteenth, and being that June is Pride, it is important to acknowledge and respect the histories, experiences, and identities that we hold dear to ourselves. To be able to thrive as your authentic self in workspaces and life is something we all should strive to provide our students and fellow employees as they engage with our respected organizations. We hope that by engaging in our discussion today, you'll be able to walk away with tangible ideas and perspectives to make your organization a place for all to belong. On the screen, there are 3 norms that we want attendees to be mindful of as they listen to our panelists. It is now my absolute honor to introduce our panelists for today. First is Crystal Shillingford, is the US West DEI Campus Recruiting Lead at EY. Crystal has over 12 years of experience in campus recruiting, working to help college students and recent graduates find internships and full-time positions. In her current role, Crystal creates and drives strategy for a team of over 50 recruiting members on full life cycle recruiting of diverse students. During her 9 years with EY, Crystal has had multiple roles on the talent acquisition team in both New York and Southern California. Isadora Ocampo is a recruiter at Guess Inc. She graduated from USC Annenberg School of Communication in the spring of 2018. Since then, she has been working and growing at Guess Inc. as a recruiter. Isadora specializes in seeking out outstanding college and entry-level talent for her organization. During her free time, she loves to give back and volunteer her time by helping students with anything college or career-related. Jessica Lee is the Executive Director and co-founder of NeuroTalent Works, a nonprofit organization building neurodiverse workplaces and transitioning gifted adults on the autism spectrum into meaningful talent for corporations. Through her work, Jessica is eager to change business and society's perceptions about autism and focus on inclusion and neurodiversity in the workplace as an impetus for greater societal change and acceptance. Trinice Collins is a campus lead / DE&I at Herc Rentals. Trinice is a very active practitioner in the DEI space. She has spent most of her career being a champion for the underrepresented groups within a variety of industries. She focuses on not only attracting and hiring diverse talents, but also working within the organization to ensure that there are processes, programs, and resources made available that will ensure that all these great talents are considered and promoted into leadership roles. So for our attendees, you are all going to learn so much today. So to get this discussion started, we wanted to establish what DE&I means to you and your organization. So can all the panelists answer the following? How do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how does your organization measure DE&I? And we'll start with Crystal.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Malika. And again, to everyone that's here represented, such a fantastic opportunity just to learn a little bit more about our organizations. But at EY, we believe that inclusive workplaces where people come from all backgrounds and can achieve their full potential is really central to achieving our purpose. And so ethnic diversity is one important element of the success of our overall diversity and inclusiveness efforts. And so the way that we really define our strategy is twofold. First, we create an inclusive culture where all of our processes are fair and equitable, in which all of our people are both expected and equipped to team and lead inclusively. And then second, we provide equitable access to experiences, relationships that contribute to success and enable really just advancement, development, We really focus on mentorship and sponsors, feedback, and leadership opportunities. We achieve all of this by holding our business leaders accountable. So, from an inclusiveness and diversity perspective, it truly is all hands on deck. It needs to come from the top down. And so we set high expectations and we do measure results. In terms of how we measure results, we have programs in place. Many of you, if you are going through recruiting with EY, programs like Experience or Expedition EY, Experience EY, really anything with EY in it, Discover EY, our launch internship programs. These are just some, from a recruiting angle, programs that we have in place that really help us to achieve our overall objective of diversifying our workplace. In addition to that, from a measurement perspective, there's accolades, there's awards in the workplace that we also have been awarded. And so things like Working Moms of the Year, we've, 22 consecutive years that we've won this award, or best places to work, top diverse companies to work for, et cetera. So there's a ton of different awards and just things that we like to measure ourselves on in terms of how successful we are in the workplace. I can truly go on and on about this, but I'll turn it over to our next panelist to contribute.
Well, thank you, Crystal, for kicking us off. We'll go to Isadora next.
Yes, so at our organization, DEI, and how that's defined is, of course, being as diverse as possible and leveling the playing field and making sure that we're opening the doors to all experiences, backgrounds, and ethnicities. And then, of course, beyond that, making sure that we're fostering an environment, which is an open door policy that we have to make sure that everyone has a fair chance to share any opinions, thoughts, just creating that really open environment of trust, teamwork, and respect is something that's very important to us. And then, of course, making sure that we have tools, resources available to everyone so that everyone can do their jobs successfully. And then how we measure it is in all levels. We're looking, statistically speaking, we're looking at the numbers of our huge organization, from the C-suite level, from the executive level, from the management level. Like, what do those numbers look like? What's that demographic makeup look like at each of those kind of areas? And the internship program, which I specifically manage at GUESS, what does the demographic makeup look like there? How can we improve? So we're looking at these numbers, looking at these statistics, and then from there, having conversations to make sure that we are on the right track moving forward.
Amazing, thank you. Jessica?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And same, I could talk for a long time about this very question, but I'll start with, as Malika mentioned, our focus is on neurodiversity. And so for us, when we look at DEI, we are really partnering with companies to consider what it means to really include like the full range of diversity and inclusion, to include neurodiversity. And so what we talk to a lot of companies about is that, a lot of the DEI work currently that's been so important and happening is in what we would say is more identity diversities, gender and race, and these diversity attributes that are a bit more apparent. Neurodiversity is an introduction to cognitive diversity, something that's less apparent, but I think the pandemic has shed light too on the tie to mental health and how important that is for teams, and that we can't ignore that as a factor to equity and inclusion. And it's different. It requires neurodiversity, challenges organizations to have to approach and do work a little differently. And so we bring in universal design to the workplace, where, it's used a lot in schools so that, students can learn with all different styles. And so we help to introduce universal design in the workplace. And how do you really build hiring, interview, workplace practices that are inclusive of a diversity of minds. And we believe that actually raises the equity for all diversities. And so, yeah, a little different, but we're just grateful to be at the seat to have to be able to talk about it further. from a measurement perspective, I think this is one of like the most challenging questions, I think, for all of us. I think the quantitative part for us, because we're a workforce development agency, a lot of it is looking at, how many people we're placing into jobs, all the demographics that I think we all measure. But, so we're starting to look at, how lives are changed when you give someone who's unemployed a living wage that's above, normally what they may have been making. That's a quantitative point that's really important to measure. But I think my favorite are all of the qualitative impacts that we get to measure. And in all of our work as, DEI champions, the stories of impact are probably the most meaningful. And so I think that goes to, how companies define values and what's important. One story I can share is, a very large employer that we work with who, hosted a neurodiversity training for a hiring program that they're running. And there was a hiring manager that was asking really he was being a jerk and asking really poor questions about our community. And this hiring manager, apologized after and then said, Jessica, I spoke to the senior leaders and we're removing him from the program. He is not the right fit. He does not understand your community. And that was so powerful for us as a story that, and I think it's the hard work of DEI work where sometimes you have to kind of be the one to stand up for a community. And so from a qualitative standpoint, that was really impactful for us, for our corporate partnerships. So just adding that to the mix.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that story too. And I think we're really going to dive into some of those challenges, but I appreciate the addressing of when it's right to call out versus call in. And that organization, I think, did a great job of alleviating a situation. And we're going to now go to Trinice.
Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be invited to speak and to be on this panelist with, obviously, some brilliant ladies. So I'm thrilled and I cannot wait to learn more. You guys have already said a lot of things that have piqued my interest and I'm just really on the edge of my seat waiting to learn more. So I feel like I'm a guest listening in as well. How I define diversity, and I'll take it kind of two parts, myself and then how the organization views it and measures it as well. So I define diversity as, I heard a story years ago, that diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity is akin to being invited to a party. And equity is, or inclusion is where you are asked to help plan the party, right? It's not just a numerical value. Yes, those are really important, right? How many ethnic diversity do you have within your organization? How do you scale that? All of those things are extremely important. And of course, programmatizing diversity, equity, and inclusion is also very important. But it's also, how do your employees feel within an organization? Is there such thing as psychological safety within your small, internal groups? So I defined it within those parameters, if you would, and then my organization defines it somewhat similar as well. So what we do is we look at the data. We're spanned across the US and Canada, and so our data is also pretty expansive. And so we looked at where we were deficient. And historically, we've been very deficient in a lot of the diverse spaces. And what we did was we kind of took a self-reflection, and then we kind of put a strategy together. Okay, how are we going to attract, not just attract, but also internally change the culture? And once that's worked on, how do we promote internals within to leadership roles? So those are the things that we look at and evaluate. And then, speaking of the evaluation, how we measure these things, we do it twofold: visually, which is probably the easiest thing, and of course, visually being backed up by data. How many individuals did we have before in terms of ethnic diversity? Where were they hired within the organization? What's our plan for them in terms of succession planning, and how do we wrap that into the DE&I strategy? And then also, where are they now? Are they groomed? Are they ready for, the next step within their career? So like I said, visually backed up with data as well. We do employee surveys. We measure by employee engagement as well. So things that are a little bit more tangible. But for me, it's always extremely exciting to see where the organization started and now where it's going. We've got a lot of room for growth. We absolutely do not have all of the answers, but the good thing is that we know that and we recognize it, and we're taking steps to really kind of be a part of this broader conversation. So thanks for that question.
No, thank you. And thank you all for sharing, because I think, a lot of organizations see DE&I as something to work toward, and there's an end goal, but really it's a journey. It's always going to evolve, and you are constantly having to kind of assess yourself and check yourself to see where could we go to continue to support new talent than our current employees. So our next question is kind of building off on what a few of you have already shared, which is about how does your organization set DE&I goals? So anybody can jump in.
I'm happy to kick us off. So as I mentioned previously, and I think this is probably for all organizations, it's, in terms of setting goals, it's buy-in at all levels, right? It's top down. Every single person that works at our organizations needs to be bought into this strategy, right? But specifically from an EY perspective, we work with our business units and strategic teams. The way that we're set up is we have an office of inclusion that sits at the national or the Americas level. And this office really helps us create streamlined, strategy across the US. And so we work with this team to develop strategy to make sure that we are increasing the awareness, understanding, accountability, just at retention, development, everything that we're implementing within our respective, we'll say regions or business units, that it all rolls up to one centralized vision or mission, right? So we work with that group. We also have an advisory council that's composed of senior leadership, representing all of our service lines, all of our business units. That helps us to really track our progress and our success. Of course, a lot of the data points, that goes without saying. All of our companies are tracking data. We also measure diversity in specific areas like headcount. We're looking at talent attraction, acquisition, retention, and as Trinice mentioned, engagement surveys, right, throughout the year, like how engaged are our people? Are you feeling like you belong? Are you feeling like you're heard? So all of these things, I think they're all very similar across the organizations represented here today, but that's just a little snapshot of how we really set our DEI goals.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else before we move on to the next question?
I'll piggyback on a lot of that, because I know for us, we took a like I said, reflection, and we looked internally to see where the gaps were, and as to be expected, there were gaps, right? But what we did was we kind of narrowed that down to say, hey, what exactly does the landscape of the organization look like currently? Well, for us, we were primarily male, and we were primarily white male. So we could be very specific and very transparent with the data. And once we did that, it really kind of freed us to say, hey, this is an equipment rental industry. Historically, of course, we've had hesitation from different genders and diversity groups to be a part of it. However, how do we change that? So our strategy was really, hey, we are going to connect with different parties within the community. And our goal and mission is really to have our employee base be representative of our communities that we serve. So we actually use that as our mission. We use that as our measuring stick. And within each of our branches, that's the goal. So it was very, very practical. We just included a lot of those similar thought processes when we designed everything. So piggybacking on Crystal, that's a good point.
Well, thank you both for sharing. And I think there's so much power in meeting your clients or employees where they're at to really get a good idea of where to move forward and how to kind of move that strategy. is such an important step. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So our next question before we transition to recruitment, what are the challenges that your organization is currently facing in regards to DE&I? And what are the most critical next steps your organization needs to take to overcome these challenges?
I'll jump in, and because our challenges are just so glaring every day when I look at it. So for us, it really kind of piggybacks on what I said before. Our organization and our industry has been historically, one-dimensional. And for us, we're trying to change that to where it's more evolving and including the younger generation. All a part of succession planning, but it's all a part of a broader strategy as well. If we have a lot of our employee base that are at the retirement age and ready to exit the door, then who do we have to actually welcome in to refresh things? So that's one of the major barriers we have. Our organization, we've looked at that. We knew that was an issue, so we've been kind of planning this whole time. And so the solution for that is actually partnered with a lot of schools and universities. In my world, that's a lot of HBCUs, Hispanic colleges and universities, partnering with, maybe the different minority groups that are represented within the DE&I space. But it's really ensuring that our internship and our early career development program is really robust, and where we're planning out, 3, 5, 10 years down the line, and making sure that our succession planning is also in line with that plan as well. One of the worst things is having individuals of diverse background come into an organization, 5 years later, they're still in the same role. That's unnecessary. So it takes planning and thoughtful processes in line to fix that.
Yes, and I appreciate you giving that intentionality early on in the planning process, and not just to figure it out as time goes on, but to really plan ahead of time. And that's something that I think we all can control now as we're going into our strategy and trying to work towards some of these challenges to bring in new talent, and specifically talent from minoritized backgrounds. So thank you. Isadora?
Yes. So one thing that I am really happy to share is Guess. We've been around since 1981, and Guess is a brand that quickly evolved to expanding and having a brand presence in over 100 countries now. So naturally, at the core of it, we've always been very, I think, naturally just diverse, and have always valued and honored and respected different cultures and traditions and ethnicities and backgrounds. But I think a important challenge now is, especially with the really important conversations taking place as of recent, is making sure that we're actively having consistent conversations, from here on out. And one really cool thing that Guess is doing now is they started a diversity council. So they invited a select group of individuals from our organization here at the headquarters in LA, people from different departments, levels, backgrounds, stories, experiences, and I believe they meet on a bi-monthly basis, and they're having really real, open, engaging conversations, and are helping to set goals and just learn from each other, which I think is awesome. So that's one thing that they're doing. But yeah, and then also is something that I have to really be more mindful of now and start really thinking about as we are having these conversations, is being the internship program manager, is making sure that now I am going out and recruiting individuals from all backgrounds and leveling the playing field from just different areas. And yeah, and I'm excited to delve deeper into that in one of the later questions too. But yeah.
Thank you, Isadora. Yes, we're definitely going to dive into all things recruitment and what we can all be doing now. So we'll definitely touch on that. And then Jessica, I know you wanted to speak.
Yeah. I think, again, speaking mostly on behalf of the neurodivergent community, but as we consult and work with companies, I think we're still seeing the challenges of, especially with our community. I think one is, the education and training around what it means to be inclusive, at least for neurodivergent individuals. And the reason being that as mentioned before, it requires us to do work differently. And, we'll share, I think we can share about this in the next section about, equitable interviews. But one of the things that we encourage when we're working with companies too, is to partner with, the organizational effectiveness team within organizations, the organizational change management teams, because so much of this is the psychology piece of senior leadership. It's mindset shifts. And, I talked to other colleagues about how DEI work really begins within ourselves as individuals, because we are what make up an organization. And sometimes getting leaders to make those shifts and to take that leap of faith to do things differently. They've worked, for many senior leaders we meet, they've worked so long to get to the position they're in that it's risky to make change and to do things differently. And so we try to introduce, strategies in which you can make small shifts. But I think getting org effectiveness and org psychology teams to partner in efforts is something that, we see as important, and that we've seen as, an effective way to try to kind of make some of those shifts. And I think, the work of inclusion is that we truly, our management practices, how to be inclusive leaders, that we manage to the individual needs of our team members, I think is really what, we need to move towards. And so that's a lot of those attitude and behavior shifts. So, yeah.
And Jessica, that is a perfect segue to our next question, because a lot of times too, it seems like when an organization is setting like DEI strategy and goals, it's like this larger picture that it's going to take time to get there. And it's like, well, what can I start doing today? And specifically to recruitment, a lot of times our own, preconceptions and biases, even when they're unconscious, come into play when you're going into interviews or going into recruiting candidates. So with our first question, we wanted to address, how do you navigate individual preconceptions and biases in the hiring process?
I'll take a stab at that only because it's something that I deal with currently. So it's fresh. I think one of the main ways I started thinking about that is I looked at recruitment internal. So obviously you've got the external hire, and it's really important that you've got proper representation during just the interview process, right? Start in there. But also maybe it's going internal to see the hiring managers and how do they view diverse talents. Even to Jessica's point, it starts really there. How individuals that sit in those hiring manager seats, how are they viewing those individuals that we put before them? And I think it's really important to do coaching, maybe mentorship, maybe do reverse mentorship with diverse individuals as well within the organization. Or maybe it's doing, unconscious bias training or microaggression, which is something that I know that is really effective. So I think really taking an evaluation of how to approach diversity hire is extremely important, not just meeting the numbers itself, but how do you visually view and mentally view the employee or potential employee is just as crucial for sure.
Definitely. It is so true that doing that evaluation piece to really assess where everyone is at is just a great way to see how you can move forward. And there's so much training out there. Like you can go online and find some amazing training on navigating microaggressions and what's not okay to say in a workplace. And so many people have this at their fingertips, but don't take that step yet. But that's something you can be doing today. So I appreciate you sharing that. Crystal?
Yeah, just to add on, Trinice, you covered training and whatnot. And for us at EY, it is a requirement that if you are part of the interview process, that you go through extensive training as it relates to managing bias and unconscious bias, microaggression, et cetera. So that is a requirement that if you step foot on a campus or you are speaking to somebody virtually, whatever it may be, that you have gone through the proper training. And in addition to that, as it relates to just the overall hiring process, if we look at it at a macro level, I should say, there are so many different people involved in the process, right? It's not just one person making a decision on who gets hired, who goes to second rounds, or whatever it may be, who goes further in the process. It is literally from the individuals that you're meeting on campus, all the way through the formal interview process and then some, right? So there are so many people that us as recruiters, we are getting opinions, seeking opinions, and really helping with the overall assessment and evaluation process. And so I think it's important to recognize that it's not just one person making a decision, it is all hands on deck, right? So every touch point that you have with an individual on your campus, it's all part of the evaluation and assessment process, right? So I think that's one other thing to keep in mind as you navigate the recruiting process.
No, definitely. I appreciate that you also remind everyone that hiring is not just on one person's shoulders, and it is important to hear from other voices and get those insights and really value the insight and like feedback that they're providing as you move forward in making a decision. So amazing point. Jessica?
Yeah, so this is probably like the most important question for our community of how to make equitable hiring and interview practices. Just, for really quick background, neurodiversity, meaning any individuals that have developmental differences such as autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and several others. And so part of this is that the brain has literally developed differently. And so there may be instances, especially for our autistic community, where communication challenges or communication may be different. And so a lot of the training we do with companies is to consider two things about the interview process. One is the format of the interview. So for our community, especially because verbal communication skills may not be as strong, we encourage and work with companies to build hiring processes that allow candidates to actually showcase the skills that they have for a job. Traditionally, the interview process is very social based. It's sitting across the table. I'm using my words to try to convince you and sell you on why I'm the best candidate for this job. What we do and what we encourage and design with companies is for specific jobs, how do we build an interview process where candidates can showcase their skills? So for example, we worked with an accounting firm earlier this year, and what we did was designed an interview process where there were 2 Excel tests for very specific functions and a bank reconciliation activity. So that's what the daily job, like 80% of the job is doing that. And so in the interviews, half of it was the candidates actually doing a scenario and showcasing their skills. And what's amazing is that we think that this process actually is more equitable for all interview candidates. It removes so much of the bias of communication, of appearance, of all of the things that we all know of in unconscious bias, and actually shines in how someone does the work for the actual job. And even in a virtual capacity, this has actually worked really well because you then get to see, you're sharing screens. And so you're seeing how someone's actually approaching the work. And so that allows someone to show, their skills and what they have to contribute. Even written samples or written contributions to a key question you might ask in an interview that allows someone who may not be as strong in communication to then give their answer in a written format. And I think, bias exists in so many ways in communication styles, the pace in which we speak, even the accents that people have, that it triggers something in our brains. And so thinking about ways in which we can make it more equitable in these different styles of interviewing and approaching work. And this makes it inclusive for our community, but also for everyone, I think. And so that's one thing that we really champion. And yeah, I mean, I'll give my quick plug on, for neurodiversity that, there's an 80% unemployment rate, and we believe it's because of the interview process. And so HR teams that we've worked with who've done training and a hiring program with us have, said like, oh my gosh, I've been in recruiting for 10 to 15 years and we've overlooked so many candidates because we weren't aware of how these communication differences might show up. And so we just really encourage considering that as well in how you do unconscious bias training also.
Thank you, Jessica, for that piece, because I think all of us immediately assume that an interview just means verbal communication, and that's the only way to measure and convince, as you said, as like a candidate that I should be in this role. But there's so many other creative ways that we can go about showcasing our talents and skills. And to your point, that's like the principle of universal design, that it's going to actually like help so many other individuals, not just individuals that might have a disability of some type, but maybe non-native English speakers or those that have an accent. And people should be open to trying these new ideas, specifically in those roles where skill sets are needed. And it's not just about talking about them, but demonstrating it. So thank you for sharing that. Our next question is really in regards to how each of your organizations have kind of evolved their recruiting process. So how has your organization altered or enhanced its recruiting process to be more inclusive? And a lot of you touched on that with your actual recruiting efforts, but even with going to certain schools or how you funnel candidates and find them, we'd love to hear it.
Okay, I could kick it off.
Perfect, thanks, Christina.
No worries. So yeah, I mean, our strategy has evolved immensely. I mean, I feel like every year, every month, there's something a little bit different because it's the environment in which we're living in, right? That we need to react to and put a plan in place to respond to. So our strategy has certainly been around for, 15 plus years, 20 years. One of the things top of mind is our center, and Jessica, I'm so happy that you're represented here today, but so we have neurodiverse centers of excellence at EY as well. And so these have been around, I think for the past, 2016. So this would be for the past 5-6 years. My math is a little bit off, but for the past 5 or 6 years, we've been developing neurodiverse centers of excellence where we too are really expanding the profile, the candidate pool that we are differentially recruiting. And so this is certainly something that I think is just so exciting for EY, especially for all the reasons that Jessica kind of outlined in terms of what her company focuses on. For us, we have 8 different centers, neurodiverse centers across the US. We're expanding globally, so it is certainly a strategy for us that is expanding. I think, as you mentioned, Malika, just thinking about our schools that we recruit from, EY, we have a particular focus in community colleges, right? By the time you get to college or to your 4-year institution, I should say, perhaps your mind is already made up in terms of what you've been exposed to in terms of the track that you're looking to pursue. And so we, about 2 or 3 years ago, really developed a national strategy, which we kind of piloted and spearheaded in the West in terms of targeting community colleges. And so, in addition to that, we have so many different sources that we're recruiting. Virtual recruitment. Gone are the days really that there is this focus on because you go to USC or because you go to UCLA, Cal State Fullerton, whatever it may be, that means that you are the only population that has access to our opportunities. For us, this funnel at the top is extremely wide, and you can come from anywhere. You can have a degree in English from a 4-year institution, but then get a certification from a community college that allows you to become CPA eligible, and we would still recruit you. So the profile has certainly expanded in terms of who we're looking for from an academic perspective, and just backgrounds overall. And I think the last thing is just thinking, that is top of mind for me at least, is the programs that we have in place have certainly also evolved. I mentioned a program called Expedition EY, anything again with EY at the end of it, but this program in particular is a new pilot for us. The need for us to develop this program really came or really was grounded in us needing to expand our profiles that we're recruiting for. So Expedition EY for us is a particular focus on students within the tech profile, the tech space. And when you think of accounting, you may not think directly tech. So it's an interesting evolution for us, right? So it's a particular focus with students in business and tech profiles, and really women in technology. And so you'll continue seeing, many of the big four accounting firms, so your EYs, PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, you'll see that we are certainly expanding our profiles, but us in particular, we developed this program grounded in the idea that we needed to expand and have a particular focus on those profiles. So I'll turn it over to whoever else would like to chime in, but thank you.
Crystal, you dropped so many gems during that, but as a career advisor, it's always so nice to hear from other recruiters that it's not about having a specific degree or being from a specific school or having the highest GPA to be successful or to get to an organization that you see yourself at. There's no such thing as a linear path. So it always makes my heart like beam when I hear it, because our students sometimes hold on to that. And it's almost like this myth that we're always trying to debunk, that you have to be able to just tell your story. It's okay for things to shift, and it's okay to have an interest somewhere else, but see your career profession be elsewhere outside of your major. So I always appreciate when recruiters and other employers share that information, because it's something so scary that as a student, they think that's it, like it's one and done. I can't do anything else. And specifically for different student populations and specific to like minoritized student populations, they really hold on to that. And there's this fear that I can't do this. So I'm just going to take myself out of the running without actually even pursuing it. So again, I can't thank you enough for always sharing that, because it is real. Like we're always like, no, you can do it. Just you have to tell your story and see what are the other steps you have to take there. Your major doesn't define you. Your GPA doesn't define you. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to chime in before we go to the next question? Go ahead, Isadora.
Yes, I want to chime in. So this past recruiting season, or spring recruiting season for the summer internship program, what I thought of and what I realized was, we were recruiting these past few years that I've been at GUESS from a lot of the local schools, the USCs, the UCLAs, Cal State Fullerton, Long Beach, etc. And then a light bulb went off, and I was like, HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, we should start going out to those schools and going back to the point of leveling the playing field and meeting more diverse students. That was a no-brainer. And upon doing research, what's really cool is being in the fashion industry, I learned that there's a lot of HBCUs out there with fashion programs, which is so amazing. That's the exact talent that we need. And so I started doing that outreach and building those relationships with the career centers from those schools, and very happy to share that we have HBCU representation in our summer internship program this summer from Clark Atlanta University, North Carolina A&T, amongst a few others. So that's been a really big step in enhancing that recruiting process, especially for the summer internship program. But yeah, so that's one thing. And I'm so happy because now with the whole virtual environment too, it made it that much easier to attend those like virtual career fairs at those schools, because a lot of those are out of state. I don't think there are any HBCUs in California. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But it made it that much easier to go out to those schools and to attend information sessions and just to meet those amazing students and staff at those pertinent schools.
Thank you, Isadora. It's so true that that's definitely a benefit of the pandemic, that it's so easy for us to hop on a Zoom call, but I appreciate the intentionality and impact that you made to like develop those relationships. It's not just like we exist, you all are going to come to us, but you really have to go out there and make those connections. And it's such a big part of, both professional and personal development is making relationships. Like that's all we have at the end of the day is like the people we know and generally looking out for others. So I appreciate you sharing that. And Trinice.
So I'm going to piggyback on both, because you guys had superb points. I know one of the things that we realized pretty early on, like I said, our industry is a little bit, on the different scale, if you would. It's not necessarily the first thing that a new grad would think about if you're not within the construction or equipment rental area. So what we did was we went back to the colleges and universities, and our target was a lot of the HBCUs and the Hispanic colleges and universities. And what we found was it's not enough just to recruit them. So what we did was we started mentorship processes, and how do we mentor a group of individuals? How do we incorporate them into our organization? And how do we groom them from that point? And that's been extremely interesting. That's a very interesting process. It's something that we started last year, but kind of blossom into this year as well. And then separate from that, what we found was we needed to kind of up the ante a little bit in terms of our actual recruitment and interview process. So what we did was we had, prior to COVID, a series of ride-alongs. So we would actually get around from the desk, and we would bring the person in to see a day in life, if you would, maybe an hour, 30 minutes, nothing extensive, but see what the territory looks like, see what the area around our branch locations or our locations look like. Do you see yourself in this space? Introduce you to the individuals that are working there that you would be interacting with on a daily basis. So it really gave them a very, very broad view of the work space itself and the relationships that they would be interacting with. And that seems to work very well because once they accept an offer with us, they know exactly what they're accepting. And we're able to really kind of, close the gap between, behind the desk, a male will do better in this role versus a female versus someone of diverse background. When you take them out of that interview room and space and put them in a space where it's a little bit more open and inviting and more, thorough, if you would, we see the curve happening, which I'm always super excited about.
No, definitely. And I think too, there's so much power in mentorship and tapping into the resources you already have at your organization that, you're using already to build culture and to build those retention pipelines for your employees. To use that in the recruiting process is definitely a way to get, prospective talent excited about your organization. As you said, they know exactly what to expect when they come in. And I also think that would really help with alleviating any sense of imposter syndrome, which is something that's really common, I think, when you start a job, but specifically if you're from like a minoritized background or like your first gen, or maybe an international student, where you start to second guess the minute you come in because you're like, I didn't expect that. So being able to kind of take down the curtain and be like, what to expect when you come in, that really helps make that process so much better when you start. So with our next two questions kind of on recruitment, we'll keep them pretty quick to get over on the retention side. But if you all wanted to just throw out, what are some of the connections, people, organizations, platforms you can personally tap into to help source a diverse set of candidates for hiring? As we discussed, you go to the schools, you change up your strategy, go to community colleges if you weren't already there, but anything else that, maybe you discover that is an amazing way. Jessica?
Yeah, I can add to this, just being a workforce development organization that I'll champion for all of us, that there are a lot of nonprofits and organizations that are focused in workforce development. And there's a whole staffing segment called the Alternative Staffing Alliance and Alternative Staffing Organizations. And these are often organizations that are really trying to staff quote unquote alternate pools that are not as mainstream. So I would definitely check that out. And then, local workforce development organizations. If you're looking for any in the disability space, we know a whole ton. So please feel free to reach out. And for other, organizations also previously incarcerated, immigrants, there's so many organizations that are doing great work. And so to seek those out as a talent sourcing pipeline as well.
Definitely. You want to tap into your local nonprofits. It's sometimes a sector that we rely on so heavily, but from a recruiting standpoint, we don't think about, but definitely support our local nonprofits. I'm an MPA student at USC, so it's my passion. But
Thank you.
for our last question, we really wanted to hear from all of you as former candidates to your organization. What attracted you the most to your current organization? Because you know what it's like to be a prospective candidate, and there was something about your organization. And I know for Jessica, you saw a need and created the ideal organization you wanted. So just wanted to kind of hear from you all before we move over to retention.
Yeah, I'll start that one off. I think for me, what was really important was looking for a company that gives back and does good work. And at Guest, they love to give back, one, at the global level through our Guest Foundation, and they make monetary donations to various organizations and nonprofits such as NAACP, Boys and Girls Club of America, et cetera, et cetera. And also at the local level, we have a Guest Cares group at the headquarters here in LA, and we tend to do a lot of volunteer work with local organizations, whether that's raising money for childhood cancer or putting together school supplies and backpacks and giving them to kids in need, or traveling to Puerto Rico and building like water tanks and things like that. That's something that was very important to me and something that we do on a consistent basis. And then also, being that we are in the retail fashion industry, sustainability is a huge focus for us right now. And we have an amazing rockstar sustainability team. We've been awarded a few awards recently for our sustainability reporting, which is also super great. That's very important to me. So I just love that it is a company with a conscience and it's a company with a heart.
Oh, thank you, Isadora. I love that. It's important that, the organizations that you work for also have values that align with how you feel and how you believe and want to go about the world. So
Great.
I love that. Anyone else? We'll go into retention because, as we know, recruiting does not end when you extend an offer to a candidate. Retention is a huge part of the new candidate experience, especially when they enter an organization and specifically in that first year that they're a new candidate. So our first question is, what tangible steps can be taken earlier in the onboarding process, even if you're a startup or a smaller organization, as time/resources are limited, to build a sense of belonging? Jessica?
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of something that Trinice mentioned in the beginning that we really focus on with companies, which is truly the foundation of psychological safety. The ability to show up to work as you are, and to be valued. And I think psychological safety is just something that I think that we're all underlying in all of our efforts, where, you can talk to a manager and be able to share, like, hey, this is how I do my best work. This is what's helpful for me. But that often requires leaders who are willing to lead with curiosity and understanding. And so I would say that, challenging teams to think about what that means. And I think of a story, my significant other worked at a company that was just such a toxic work environment. And he would come home every day and complain about his bosses, about his coworkers, of just how toxic it was. And I could see like the weight that this was bearing on him. And it occurred to me, I was like, oh my gosh, my goal in life is to never be a boss that my employees go home and talk to their families about. Like, that is not the type of environment that I would ever want to create for my teams. And I don't think any of us enjoy or want to be a part of. And so much of our trauma that we have to figure out in the workplace stems from those things. And so I think bringing this into the conversation early on from an inclusive leadership training practice in the onboarding process makes all the difference. Even as a manager, just first asking someone, yeah, how do you do your best work? Like, tell me about bosses that you had in the past and what worked well and what didn't. How can I be supportive to you? And also being clear about performance expectations. I think that's something, especially for our community, but in general, that oftentimes we're like, we don't really know what it takes to move up in the company or what's really looked at from a leadership perspective and promotion perspective. So having those conversations up front, having it written down and thought through is, what we encourage for organizations early on.
Thank you, Jessica, because I think, it's pretty common practice to just be given on the first day that employee handbook, read through it, maybe go through the website, get to know the organization, but there's not as much time and care taken to get to know you as the individual and how you work. So I appreciate you sharing just the power of asking questions, specifically when it comes from a supervisor as part of that onboarding process to get to know work styles. And Trinice?
I would say one of the things I've found to be really effective is also mentorship from the onset. And this could be small scale or large scale, but really aligning that new person as they walk through the door, especially if it's a small startup, you may not have the representation, but when that person walks through the door, if there's a way to partner that individual with maybe a mid-level or even the top level individuals within the organization, so they can have a visual of where the potentials are, right? Where can I go? And I think with doing something along that line, it really does help the retention piece and component for that individual as well. So I think starting from the onset, hey, you're valued, we've made room for you in our organization, this is where we see you going, which goes back to the internal part, right? Have you made room for the person? Do you actually have a plan for them? Is there a long-term vision for this individual that you've just brought in? Or are they, warm in a seat? Are they just there to get a job done? So I think even if it's a startup, you can still plan and you can have a strategy in place for every person that's there. Maybe you don't have a robust succession plan and team, at your resource and your fingertips, or you don't have the training that, larger firms may have, but you can start with one person. It makes a massive difference in that individual's, and they will follow suit. The next person that comes behind them, they will seek out and they'll want to mentor and bring that person under their wing, irregardless of if you have the same gender or color or orientation. They'll want to give back because you've created an inclusive environment from the onset. So I think that's an important point.
No, definitely. There's so much power in mentorship and doing that early on, and knowing that you have value at an organization is so important. And we also know that in terms of recruitment and having an employee stay at an organization, it can be costly if there's high employee turnover. So as organizations, we should be doing everything in our power to make sure our employees want to stay. So similarly, with the next question, we wanted to kind of talk about those retention practices. So what are the different practices surrounding retention among employees within the first 6 to 12 months? We touched on mentorship, which is so powerful, but anything else that might be something that's worked at your organization or you've heard that others try, just because those first year can be so pivotal, and every organization has ebbs and flows, busy periods, down periods. So it's important to see it from that first year.
I will kick us off here. We touched upon mentorship and sponsorship and whatnot. And so in addition to that, at least Ernst & Young, we have affinity groups. We have professional networks that, while they may be focused on a particular group, for example, our Black professional network or a Latino professional network, Unity, et cetera, it's open to everyone and anyone, right? It's all about building a sense of community, a sense of belonging. And this is huge for our firm. It is at really just like the lifeline of our firm is to build this community. So as a new employee, as an intern, really, we all have the opportunity to get plugged into these communities, these affinity groups. The affinity groups have several events, whether they're in person, they're virtual. Of course, we've definitely adapted and evolved over the past year. But these affinity groups are just opportunities to connect with perhaps professionals that are like-minded or not, just really expand the overall network and of individuals. In addition to our affinity groups, we have a program called EY Unplugged. And EY Unplugged is specific for underrepresented minorities. And here at EY, we define that as Black, African American, Latinx, or Native American. And so for our folks that self-identify as underrepresented minorities, you have the opportunity to get plugged in with EY Unplugged. And so essentially what this is an annual program for our staff and senior members to attend. It's in person normally, but definitely has evolved to become virtual. But it is a program where across the US, individuals can attend. And it's a way to get recharged. It's a way to, within this community to talk through some of the maybe more difficult topics of what it is to be a minority within corporate America, within EY in particular, right? Not every single day is going to be roses. And let's just get real with that. It is a very challenging work environment that we have here. It's accounting. So it's very challenging. It's very fast paced. And so being able to have a community, not only within your local market, not only within your local region, not only within your specific practice, but across practice, across the US is really powerful. Us as recruiters, we have the opportunity to attend as well and help facilitate dialogue, and just the conversations that happen specifically within your first 6 to 12 months are paramount into the probability of you being able to stay or just from our overall retention. So for us, it's a pivotal program, and certainly something that I recommend for any new staff senior to attend.
It's an amazing program. I was like, oh, to get those opportunities to be able to recharge are so important, because somebody once told me it's not about like time management in the workplace, it's energy management too. And your own personal energy sometimes that you put toward in work environments can drain you really fast, especially in those first year that you're there in an organization. So it's such a wonderful event. So thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Jessica?
Yeah, I can share really briefly. This is actually when I started at a large consulting firm after I graduated from USC. I was paired with a peer mentor, and that was really helpful. And for a neurodivergent community where people have, hiring programs, they also implement this where it's a peer that, is helping you to navigate the social, cultural aspects of starting a new job in a new company. And it relieves the pressure of a more professional mentor, you could say. And so that was really helpful for me. That's been really helpful for our community that starts in new jobs, because so many of the questions that you might have, you may not want to ask that mentor, but you could ask a peer who's purely just there to help you navigate and assimilate. So another strategy that I think helps, and I benefited from when I started in my first job.
Yes, peer mentorship is so powerful because you have that relatability pace, and they can actually be like, I've been in your shoes, I know what you're going through, and maybe this is how you can get through it, and actually have that empathetic side of hearing them out, and it's not coming from a supervisor or higher up. So yes to peer mentorship. So with our last question, before we open it up to audience Q&A, so keep the questions coming, everyone. How can your organization evolve DE&I practices regarding employee retention? So we talked about everything DE&I is a journey. So where could you see your organization going, and how can it evolve? Specifically now that we're even coming out of a post-pandemic world, maybe not as much Zoom, we're still going to keep Zoom in certain aspects. So how do you see your organization evolving DE&I practices regarding employee retention?
I'll jump in here because I think it's really important to think about the employee and how they interact with their internal, I won't say stakeholders, but just the internal different segments within a lot of large companies, right? You've got accounting side, you've got marketing, you've got just different segments within any large corporation. and I think the focus, and especially with retention, is how are we preparing our employees to be marketable? How are we, maybe it's a skill set deficiency. How are we providing them the resources? If you started out as an accountant, maybe your passion is in marketing, maybe it's in sales. Do we have rotational programs that we can kind of tap into and expose these individuals into, just to see if, hey, maybe during the interview process, they were great in sales, and from being in the organization after a couple months or a year, they hate it. They just didn't want to tell you. But those are the individuals that we see leave out the back door. But if we're able to identify that and really be curious and ask those questions constantly, because we all evolve over time, but constantly asking the question itself in a way where it is a safe environment where someone can easily raise their hand and say, hey, I know I've been invested my time here, but I'm really interested in, to Crystal point, accounting, or, fashion, or whatever it may be. And then providing them that safe space to actually learn from those different segments, and with the assurance that, hey, we're all one company. We can use your brain cells and your expertise and your passion somewhere else. I think that will evolve into a happy individual who want to invest their time and their energy into an organization's success.
Yes, there is so much power in rotational programs because, to your point, it sometimes doesn't feel safe to want to go out and experiment and see what else is out there. Is it worth that risk for me to kind of pivot out of everything to see if I actually like it? So when organizations have that opportunity to showcase all their different departments and let their employees know that they can see what else is out there, it's a great way to have your employees want to stay and try it out and value their organization, that they're like, they want me to stay and they want me to be myself doing the truest work that I'm most passionate about. So I absolutely love that. Anyone else before we move to Q&A?
I can just add a little bit too. And I think for us, it's like 3 words. It's EY, wow. And for us, wow actually is an acronym that stands for a way of working. And so I think over the past, obviously, year, we've certainly had to evolve in terms of how we're working virtually. And wow is really this future wave of gauging everyone's level of comfort and the way that they feel they can get their job done, right? So it's apparent over the past year, we've been able to survive, right? All of us here have been able to survive as companies and working virtually. And so that option for us as employees continues even beyond post-pandemic. So our company right now is really looking at assessing the individual needs, right? So as an example, I'm a new mom, a new working mom. I had my first child over the past 9 months. And for me, in the past, I would go to the office pretty often. I would travel frequently as a component of my role. And with our new strategy, wow, in place, you guys got to remember that, wow. With this new strategy in place, I may not need to do that anymore. There are other ways of working. The firm is working with me to identify my level of comfort. My team is identifying my level of comfort, and we're determining how to get my job done, although I don't physically need to be in a space. And so that's just another thing, is being able to bring your whole self to work is paramount to getting your job done. And for me, I have certain things in place that I just cannot do physically because of this new journey that I'm on. And so I'm appreciative that my firm at this point in time is being able to respond to that and create these individualized, very customized experiences for each one of our employees, and also adapting to the needs of our clients, of course, keeping all of that in mind, and the needs of our business, et cetera. There are certainly parameters in place around that, but I think it is something that is so excellent to be able to incorporate into our overall strategy, is individually, what do you need and how can we make it work? We knew we can make it work over this past year. So what else can we do moving forward now that business is kind of going back to normal? How can we still sustain what we've done over the past year and just enhance it, make it a little bit more inclusive for everybody?
I mean, the best way to summarize it is wow, like that's
Is
what
wow,
every
exactly.
organization you want to feel valued and heard, that your needs are being seen and acknowledge that you can still do your work in a very productive, effective way, and your value is still seen, even if you can't do certain things, because things have shifted. We all have gone through something very traumatic and priorities have changed. And I think that's super important. And I think a lot of organizations are also realizing right now that they do have to listen to their employees. And yes, wow is the best way to describe it. But that is it on our questions that we had for the panelists. We are now going to open up to some of the Q&A that Erica and Jennifer have been managing. So our first question that we have, and I have a few of you I'm looking to for this, what are successful ways your company has engaged with universities like USC to increase your DE&I recruitment? So I know a few of you have participated in diversity meet and greet, which makes me excited. Isadora, I'll pass it on to you.
Yes, oh my gosh. Just kudos to you, Malika, and your team and the other teams at USC who are putting on these amazing programs and opportunities for your diverse students to come to the forefront and meet employers and recruiters for amazing opportunities. Because as we all know, I mean, it's pretty clear statistically speaking, a lot of the demographics at schools like USC and UCLA isn't even across the board. So knowing that there are staff and individuals like you who are creating these amazing opportunities, thank you so much. And because of that, I've been able to be a part of those and meet the amazing students at USC to increase that DEI recruitment. So that's been a big way, is now knowing that there are schools that have this amazing work being done. I can now seek out those projects and staff at all the other schools that I'm recruiting from to say, hey, what work are you doing? What specific opportunities do you have for your diverse students, so that I can connect with them and not just go to a general career fair, which we will of course continue to attend and go to, but we want to go to these, extra, take that extra effort to go to these other amazing, opportunities as well. So that's been a really big thing. So yeah, just thank you for all those amazing opportunities. That's been great.
Well, thank you. And we have our event in the fall again, but something I would also like to add to that, specifically with connecting with students, there's a lot of power in student organizations. So specifically, if your industry is something like accounting or engineering, look at some of those universities and their student orgs that have specific like affinity organizations in engineering or in accounting. So like I can think of like NABA, for example, and we have a chapter at USC, and being able to work with those student orgs and offer your, panelists like to be a speaker at one of their events or to do a joint event together is a great way to partner with student organizations and increase brand awareness of your organization, but also get candidates from other backgrounds excited about the work you're doing. And many schools have like open databases of the different student orgs because there's just so many. So I highly recommend tapping into that as well. But any others on terms of ways to engage with different communities? Jessica?
Yeah, I guess I'll do a quick plug for our event this fall. We were so excited. January 2020 was like one of the last in-person events we did, was USC's very first neurodiversity hiring initiative. And so it was a recruiting event specifically for the neurodivergent community. So a partnership between the Career Center and the Disability Students Program Office. And it was a great success. EY was there too, Crystal. Would love for, any recruiters that are present today, if you're interested in attending. Part of what we're going to do this year is, a quick 1 hour training prior to the event, just so that you can understand and, know who our community is and what to expect coming into the event. And so, we'd love for anyone else to join. And we are considering possibly partnering with another university so that, as a recruiter, you're going to be able to meet, a broader group of candidates. So please feel free to attend, and we'd love to have you. And thank you to the Career Center for being open to our idea and hosting this with us. Yeah.
I mean, we have to meet our students where we're at. We can't just say because we're the Career Center, students are going to come, especially now that we're going back in the fall. People want football, people want to make friends. Maybe sometimes Career Center is last on their list. So what can we do to get everyone excited about it and meet them where they're at? So with our next question, this is a really interesting question. So for entry-level employees from diverse backgrounds, what has been done within your organization to ensure that they have an equitable opportunity to be promoted into leadership roles? So I know earlier in our conversation, we talked about having that upfront conversation about expectations and what, success looks like, how are you going to be measured, but anything else you would like to add on that?
The only thing I would add is, and this is something that has worked well for us, is from the onset is having an idea of what that person's potential, which of course is surrounded by a lot of conversations and with them and openness and transparency. But once that's identified, then making sure that they're involved in the succession planning, ensuring that like I said before, you've made room to accommodate their growth within the organization. And so if you've got a succession planning team, then ensuring that diverse talent or that new hire period is also part of the conversation. Where do you want to see them and where do they want to be within that, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever gap that's between the first day they set foot in one of your offices, albeit virtual since we're still in COVID, but you know what I mean.
Yes, succession planning goes a long way, but anyone else? We have another question that is definitely a lot to unpack, so I'll put it also in the chat, but would you say that leaders from your organization have fully bought into DE&I strategies, or has there been pushback from leaders with the initiatives that you and your teams have championed? If the former, how have your leaders demonstrated their support? Because we all know DE&I initiatives are all hands on deck, and it definitely helps to have input from the top.
So I'll jump in here only because I agree with your point. In fact, I think for any organization, not just ours, I think DE&I, it can't be an add-on program at all. It cannot be, well, it's just, we've got a deficiency here. It has to be, it's almost like you have to have the top level exec, it's not the CEO, push everything. Now, they don't have to be the one on the, designing programs, absolutely not. But in terms of a tangible, very, very visible support, 100%, or else DE&I simply will not work, not effectively anyway. It'll just turn into a nice program to have and something to put on the website. So, to answer that, I think it's extremely important. I know for our leadership, this actually came from our leadership, which is really nice because it made things a little bit more, pill that was easier to swallow for us all, especially in an organization that is not historically like that. It's almost like you had a champion. You had someone who was willing to say, hey, I'm drawing a line in the sand and I'm taking us all with that line. So I think that's extremely important anywhere you go.
Definitely. And it's so funny that you brought up that just posting something on just the website without the actual intention and impact can be, challenging. A lot of times people call it performative DE&I work, and it's not true to its core. So our next question is for those that are actually doing the work and are on the journey to make recruiting better, retention better for candidates of all different identities. What strategies have you utilized to market your DE&I strategies to make sure candidates are aware of all the efforts you are making? And I think this is such an important question because I know when an organization signs up for our diversity meet and greet, the first place I go is to your website. And I do a quick Google search to see what's going on in the headlines, what's in the news, and really see, are you not only proud of your efforts, but are showcasing it and really putting it at the forefront. And then through conversation, we're making sure that intention and impact is there. So from the marketing side, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, branding, marketing is just so pivotal, especially within this space, right? Because I think it was maybe Jessica that mentioned in a lot of what we do, while there is a quantitative side to it, some of it is really qualitative, right? So a lot of it is through storytelling. So at least for us, as I mentioned at the onset of the call, I mean, awards are fantastic, right? And it's not to say that we like do all of this work to be recognized. That's not why we do the work, but it is a great, ending point, at least, or recognition publicly for the work that we are doing, that we are on par or really setting the bar to where we need to be within this space. And so for us, a lot of our awards are really branded and marketed and just really shouted from the rooftops, because frankly, we are really proud of the organization that we've created and just the diverse efforts or inclusive efforts we've really taken. But to your point, yes, Malika, it's our website. It is through our presentations that we are conducting on campus and really sharing some of the fiber of who we are and those qualitative stories. It is bringing people to present or talk through whatever subject matter it is, but folks that have actually lived it and breathed it, right? So if I am talking about an opportunity, again, specific to our industry, but if I'm talking about an opportunity within the audit practice or within tax, it is bringing someone that has lived that experience to really tell the story of what it is to actually be a tax professional, a minority tax professional, if you will, or in one of our groups or whatnot. So I think it's a number of different things. Branding obviously is at the center of what we do, and in terms of telling our story. So we have a designated group that really helps us manage our brand. And so I think it's really important, at least with an organization our side, to help tell that narrative or to create that narrative.
Definitely. Those accolades and awards go a long way. And I think it's important with this work because it can be, tiring and sometimes really hard to do, but celebrate those little wins too. And to be able to showcase that to prospective candidates and other employees that, we've been doing good work and we should keep it up. Definitely showcase it. There's nothing wrong with that. So our next question for the last 8 minutes that we have is, as recruiters, what method do you use to stay in touch with candidates who don't have an opening for, but are interested in working for your organization? So we know sometimes you come down to 2 amazing candidates and you move forward with someone else, but what do you do with that other candidate that maybe didn't get the offer? How do you stay connected? Or do you stay connected?
So I think it ties back into the branding for us. And to that point, I will say that it's really important that DE&I, whoever is kind of championing DE&I within our organization, is also a part of the conversation with marketing and branding, just to ensure that you've got representation on how the organization is visually seen by the general public. So I think there's got to be a connection there, and constantly double checking, right? Because we've seen organizations that have done that and some that have not, and the end result of it. So I think that connection is important. For us, I know LinkedIn is our friend. I always say that. This is one of the ways that we attract candidates. So of course, our visibility on LinkedIn is extremely important, but it's also one of the ways we kind of keep that relationship viable, even if they weren't the ideal, person we selected. We still want to nurture that relationship and really kind of keep it as current as possible. And sometimes it's celebrating the fact that they've received a job offer somewhere else, right? So celebrating that, commenting, ensuring that you show their support in those efforts. And you never know where the future might take us. So it's really important not to just kind of close the door permanently and leave breadcrumbs along the way. So LinkedIn, great way to do that. I know I'm always on there, showcasing what we've done. And to Crystal's point, yes, of course we don't do it for awards, but it does help to validate all the hard work that goes into DE&I. So absolutely, we'll take all the awards that we can stand. Why not?
Oh, definitely. Our next question, because we actually have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to get to everyone. But How have you been able to handle your company's demanding hiring needs, given the tough talent market, while still focusing and meeting your DE&I goals? So this is an interesting question. I know depending on if it's an internship program that's just for summer, you might have just ended it, so you're not thinking yet about next summer, but what are you all doing to prepare? Or how are you handling this current market? And maybe how are you also planning to source candidates too? We had a note in the chat that they appreciated Jessica's insights on sourcing candidates, but how else can you also find ways to source candidates too? So kind of two-pronged.
I think I would go back to, I know what's worked for us. LinkedIn has been phenomenal, but I think also, selfishly, I think about our organization, like many are actually going through a growth, bursting out the seams type of growth right now. But it really kind of goes back to how intentional have you been regarding DE&I, and do you have the partnerships already in place? Have you kept that partnership warm? Was it something that was an afterthought, and of course now you're scrambling to find diverse talent and while you're growing, or did you already have those relationships kind of solidified before? So I think how organizations respond to that growth really is indicative of what their plans were and if they're trying to kind of do it off the cuff now. So I think really kind of partnering with key organizations within specific spaces, whether it's HBCU partnership, maybe it's doing in-class drop-ins. I mentioned mentorship before. Internship programs work beautifully, rotational programs, ensuring that you kind of keep your pipeline pretty active. Maybe it's sending out just different things the company's doing to your pipeline. Maybe it's, hey, we're currently doing this and we're super excited. Just wanted to share with you periodically, just touch base. So you can always have a pipeline that you can source from. So I think for us, that's been effective, but it just speaks to the DE&I strategy and how intentional it's been before.
Just to add on to Trinice's comment, I think you said it, DEI is, it's not an afterthought, right? So whether we're booming, we're growing in this tough market or not, whatever it may be, we don't go to market with, we need you to recruit 4 people. Don't forget about managing or meeting our DEI efforts. They're not two separate things. It's, we need you to hire and recruit top talent. And within that strategy already is built-in diversity, DEI efforts, right? It's not something that we have to spell out to our teams separately. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is it's not an afterthought. It is literally at the center of what we do. We already have that ingrained into our strategy. It is as simple as that, right? When we go out and recruit, we're not looking for the same person to fill every single, goal that we have. We're keeping in mind our respective strategies. So I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that it's not an afterthought. It is certainly at the focal point in how we build our strategy around that. We build our hiring goals around diversity, not the other way around.
You have to put DE&I strategy at the center of all the work we do, because we bring our full selves to work every day. We don't just take it off and all of our identities and go to work. It's really ingrained in who we are. And as I mentioned when we started this conversation, it is something we should all strive to provide our fellow colleagues and employees and prospective candidates. So because we're getting close to time, I just wanted to thank the 4 of you for being here today. I learned so much, and I think everyone on the call really walked away with some amazing ideas and things that they have in their control to currently do right now, but also to think those long-term strategic efforts to really recruit and retain amazing talent. The Career Center cannot thank you all enough for being here. Wishing you and your loved ones all the best, and fight on.